How dumb things are a competition in your family. I know that is for sure within my family. Again, like I say in most of my episodes, this is something that I was not aware of. And even this type of competition between us, it is part of the emotional abuse, it is part of the dysfunctionality within the family. But now that I'm waking up to all of the emotional abuse, all of the dysfunction, the toxicity, and healthy ways that we function or even communicate with each other, I'm realizing that there's a lot of competition. And it really, really stems from my mother, who now I look at and I do look at her sympathetically and realize that she is so insecure deep down within her, and she covers it so much that for a long time I never saw how insecure, truly insecure, sadly and crippling, the kind of insecurity that is crippling, because insecurities are a normal thing. I still have insecurities, and I think even the most healthiest or mature or self-developed people, they have some type of insecurities. But what makes it different from my mother is that she has denied her own insecurities and shoves them down so much because she believes that they are such a shame. And this is just from pure observations. And I can make this observation and say this about my mother as a matter of fact because I have lived with her for almost my entire life. The only time I haven't been with my mother full time was when I went to varsity for a couple of years. And coming back now and being old, I see what as a child I didn't understand. As a child, I didn't understand some of the things that my mother would do or say. As a child, I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong with my mother. And now, with the revelation that the Lord has led me to, realizing that she's narcissistic, meaning she lacks empathy, meaning she is so deeply wounded that a part of her will probably forever be hiding, I now can come to the conclusion that my mother tries so hard to cover up how insecure she is. It's not a shame to be insecure, but my mother definitely acts like it is a shame. When we can acknowledge to ourselves, we don't have to broadcast it to the world. I'm not expecting that from my mother, and I'm not asking that of my mother, but owning the fact that there are some things that you need to work on. I think my mother is so insecure that she might not even be fully aware of how insecure she is because she shoves it down so much. And by shoving it down so much and not really dealing with it, it comes out as a way of projecting onto others. So the things that she actually feels about herself, that she tries so hard to avoid for whatever reason, maybe something in her childhood wounded her so deeply that she can't really face her insecurities, her pain and wounds. Maybe something happened with the people that she loved and the people that she trusted that she is no longer able to open up that box. I can sympathize with that. A lot of people in the world, a lot of us, we have things that we have been through, but we also have the responsibility to help ourselves. We have the responsibility to try to get better. It's not always easy. It's easier said than done. And it all depends with what you've been through, the trauma, the wounds, the pain. I am not trying to make light of her pain or anyone's pain, but that doesn't take away from the responsibility that we still have to ourselves. Because if we don't take responsibility and try to heal and try to deal with the things that hurt us, we end up hurting those around us. And that is exactly what my mother has done and continues to do. And so because of her, she has stimulated this very unhealthy competition between us as a family. And it is a competition over such dumb things, like really dumb things. We're not as competitive as to a point of like who's so smart. I mean, we are competitive in that sense, but when you look at other families that are competitive, or you watch TV and you see people that are competitive, it's usually in a manner of like maybe academics, maybe intellectual, competitiveness, like always wanting to be the winner in a game or doing better than other people. To a certain extent, my mother has that, but we are not really driven by our intellectual capability in terms of competing. So, for example, when we play a game, honestly, we're not competitive. Like, nobody really gets wounded when somebody doesn't, like, when they don't win. It's not that type of competition. That's why I'm saying it's just the type of dumb competitiveness in our family. For example, like doing things around the house that can be very competitive. And even in the way that and I include myself because I've been part of this dysfunctional cycle, even though I have been for the longest time the most sane and probably mature one amongst the family. But because I grew up in this dysfunctionality, there was no way it was not going to rub off on me. Of course, I have some dysfunctional behavior because I grew up with these people, and some of their habits became normal even to me. So, doing things around the house, for example, I don't know if I made this example in another episode, but when it's time to close the curtains, like when it's like the evening time and it's getting dark outside, and you switch on the light and you have to close the curtains. And this is the sitting room where we're all sitting at that time because we're about to watch like soapies or drama series that we watch together. And so somebody switches on the light, and now it becomes a competition who's gonna close the curtains. It's not the good type. Is even competition the right word? I don't know. I don't know what's the right word for it, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I switched on the light, so now you should close the curtains. It's like, what? Why are we even competing about that? Why is this even an argument? You switched on the light, you can just close the curtains. And then what happens is when you do maybe switch on the light and then you close the curtains, then if you start, like for me, for example, I started noticing, as with a lot of things actually, not just the closing curtains thing, but a lot of things around the house, it's like I do it because I'm like, okay, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to switch on the lights and close the curtains. And so I end up doing it because now all of a sudden we're sitting in dark, and we're not the type of family that sits like in dark and watch TV. That's just not our thing. And so because no one is taking initiative, which is usually what they do because they want me to do it, I end up doing it. And so one day I started complaining that, hey, I seem to be the only one. Like everybody just sits and acts like they're fine with watching the TV in the dark when they're actually not. And because my mother doesn't have a backbone, and it feels so disrespectful to say that, but honestly, I'm realizing more and more that part of her deeply wounded inner child is that she doesn't have a backbone. And so she would just say, oh, can someone close the curtains? Instead of saying that, oh, maybe my sister should close the curtains because I closed them yesterday. You see how competitive I also am? Because now it's tit for tat. Now I'm also keeping count, like, okay, I switched on the light yesterday and closed the curtains, so my sister should do it. And the reason I also keep count, it's because I end up being the only one who does it. So because I end up being taken advantage of, I now have to keep count. Because I end up being the only one who does something around the house, anything else, it's not only the switching on the lights or closing the curtains, it's everything else around the house. Somehow I end up being the only one who takes initiative. And that is a form of emotional abuse, because it means they believe that I'm their toy, or I'm a pushover. Yeah, that's basically it. That is exactly what I was. I was a pushover. And because I always tried to be the good girl that impressed mommy and a people pleaser, I always took up that position to say, okay, I'm going to do it since no one's going to do it. And guess what? My sister would never take the initiative. And she was fine with me taking all the slack, taking all the responsibilities. And never once would she just, think to herself like, oh, my sister has been doing this for a while. Or let's say, for example, even just getting the groceries out of the car and unpacking the groceries. She doesn't take the initiative to say, oh, you know what? Actually, it's always my sister who does that. So I'm going to actually do it. No. So I end up keeping count because there is no fairness around this house. So if I don't keep count, if I also don't get insanely competitive, if that's even the right word for it, then I end up being the one who does the most around the house. I end up being the one who's taken advantage of. When I was in varsity, I remember that the people that I lived with, we we never distributed chores. I remember at one time I lived with four roommates. And I think that was also just like a blessing from God to live with roommates where you didn't have to discuss that, hey, you should do the dishes because you haven't done them in a while, or you should mop the floor because you haven't done that in a while, you should clean the toilet because you haven't done that in a while. Honestly, we never did that because I think part of it, when you leave home, you kind of want the freedom of not doing your chores on a strict schedule. You want the freedom of like, I can just wash the dishes whenever I want. I can wash them at 12 p.m. I can wash them at 12 a.m. I can do whatever because I'm away from home. And so I think that's just like the mentality we had as students, but somehow we managed. Like, I would know that, okay, I haven't washed the dishes in a while, so I'll wash them. And like the other girls did the same thing. And to think that us as students, we managed to actually have a mature way of doing things around our accommodation. And for me, living with my mother, who acted like a child. And I say that my mother doesn't have a backbone because she was not fair. She is not fair and truthful as to say that, you know what, you, my girl, that being me, that you actually have been helping with the groceries. So I should ask your sister. She just doesn't have the backbone for it. Instead, she will just say, can someone help me? And she knows that most of the time I'm the one who ends up doing it because my sister will just pretend like she didn't hear my mother, or she will pretend like she's busy. Sometimes she will even pretend like she's sick just to avoid a responsibility, just to avoid doing something. And so I end up doing it. So that's the type of competition that goes around with this house, like just doing things around the house. So you end up having to keep count, like, I did this the last time, so you should do this. And it's not really a mature way to live. I think closing the curtains, an activity as simple, so simple as closing the curtains, it shouldn't be a matter of competition. We really shouldn't even be keeping count. Like if someone sees that, oh, it's getting dark, I'm just going to switch on the light and I'm going to close the curtains and it's not going to be a big deal. And we shouldn't even have turns. Like it's really not even necessary for us to say, okay, on Monday you close the curtains and then on Tuesday someone else will. We don't even have to have like a strict schedule for like closing the curtains. But because there's so much unfairness going around, it feels like then for me, the one who often has to take on the responsibility, then I feel like, you know what, then let's take turns. Because I'm not going to be the one who's taken a ride for, which I have been for the very longest time. Because I thought for me that was being, I don't know, dumbly, I thought it was being respectful. I thought it was like keeping the peace. You'll die. You'll die in the name of keeping peace. You will be exhausted, you will be burdened, because even the people you're trying to keep the peace with, they don't care. They're not going to meet you halfway. So while I was trying to keep the peace so that we don't have an argument, so that my mother doesn't end up shouting and saying, hey, I said someone should close the curtains, I would take it upon myself because I just wanted to keep the peace and I wanted to please my mother. But clearly my own mother was not thinking of me and was not taking charge as a mother, as a parent, to say, hey, to say to my little sister that, hey, your big sister has been doing all of this. You also need to take up your own role in this family. No, she wouldn't do that. Here's another way that there's competition around this house. Like how you choose to carry yourself. Another thing that I'm realizing more and more with the dysfunctionality within my family is that it's almost not okay to really be firm in what you, how do I phrase this? So just be yourself. Like, for example, I've talked about how introverted I am and how my own family has made me feel uncomfortable rather about that because they thought like I needed to be more out there, more outspoken, more with people. And that was just not the case for me because I was just not that person. But somehow they were always just pushing me out of my bubble. And for some time, I was actually grateful to my mother. I was like grateful that she pushed me out of my bubble so that, I wasn't as introverted or as quiet or as this and that. But I now look back and realize that that was actually very uncomfortable for me. And I wasn't given space to be fully myself. And that was never accepted and embraced. Granted, I think whether introvert or extrovert, there are always some points that we can work on, but I feel like I was never really allowed to fully be myself. So, another way that there's just competition around here is that how you choose to carry yourself is somehow questioned or you made to feel like you think you're better than them. That's where the competition comes in, that somehow if you choose to be different and you are okay with yourself with that, somehow that makes it seems like you are a threat to them. So here's a minor example. On another Sunday, my mother and I were going to church, and I chose not to carry a bag, which is something I rarely do. I only do it when maybe we go into a revival because it's in the evenings and I have more of a casual wear and I can just carry my Bible. But on this particular Sunday, we were actually just, formally dressed up and going to church. But I didn't feel any bag working with my outfit, so I decided to just carry my Bible. My Bible is cute, so I can carry it. Even if it wasn't cute, it is my choice. It is my choice to carry my Bible. And then my mother, as we were in the car, she was just saying like, why am I not carrying my bag? And then she started pointing out why I'm not wearing stockings because it's cold. It's just it's the way they are so uncomfortable in me making a decision and sticking with it. Again, this just goes back to their own inner stuff. Like I was okay, like I didn't care if maybe some women were gonna judge me for just carrying my Bible. It's not immoral, it's not wrong, it's not a crime. It's not something that is obligated to carry a bag as a woman to church. Maybe some women would frown upon it. Maybe it's not ideal for some, but it's really just not a big deal. Nobody's going to be sitting up all night wondering, why did she just carry that Bible without a bag? But somehow that's how they want to make you feel. This is another thing. They always want to put you in this position that people are judging you. And this is a mentality that really stems from my mother. Again, back to her own insecurities, back to her own wounds and pain and hurt that she has not addressed. So it's always a matter of making you feel like people are going to judge you. People are going to judge you for the choice that you make. And a choice as dumb, as silly as me choosing not to carry a bag and choosing not to put my Bible in a bag, but somehow I am made to feel like, what are people going to say about you? Why have you chosen? So she went from me not carrying a bag, and then to me not wearing stockings because it was a bit chilly. Again, personal choice. And another thing that I think my mother's still not getting in her skull is that we are adults. We live in a house, yes. We live by her rules, yes. But how I get to dress, that is still a personal choice. Whether I choose to carry a bag or not, that is still a personal choice. And that is no disrespect to her. And I'm not even embarrassing her. It's not like I was wearing a short skirt and showing boobs or something. There was nothing embarrassing about what I was doing. There's nothing embarrassing about me not carrying a Bible. And there's nothing disrespectful about that. But she is so concerned about what people think about her that she is projecting that on me and saying that I should care, that, what are people going to think? Anyway, another way that this competition is that when you make a valid point or a powerful point, or you say something that, maybe nobody else in the house thought of, or you simply have a great idea. Now, this can go for all of us, whether it's my sister or whether it's me or my mother. Like when you make a point or you say something, mind blowing, or you have a great idea, the competition starts by them not fully acknowledging that the point comes from you. Here's how you see that they don't acknowledge the point and they don't want to really give you credit that you said something so powerful or you thought of something like that, or something you said made sense or it was a great idea. When they say it maybe another time, like for example, my mother would say this to my sister, and it's so crazy to me that my sister sees the things that my mother has done to us, because she has also suffered from, the emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse from my mother, but somehow she has turned out just like her. That's why I can't trust her. That's why I can't even have a sister that we can talk about this, because she has turned out just like her, if not worse. But my sister once said to me that while I was still in varsity, so my sister would comfort my mother when she was going through things and give her advice. And then my mother, some time later, would then come and say, oh, somebody gave me this great advice at work, or a friend or a colleague. And then she would say exactly what my sister had said. So this was just her way of discrediting my sister. And honestly, I believe that she was just making it up by saying that somebody at work had said it. Or if somebody at work had said it, she wouldn't even attribute to the fact that my sister also said it. So she will act like the person who said it, or the person that she pretends said it, she will act like that was a just brand new thing that you heard, because she just didn't want to give acknowledgement to my sister's great advice, useful advice. But she would rather act like maybe she thought of it herself. Like maybe weeks later, she'll act like, oh, this is what I thought of by myself, maybe by just paraphrasing it. But then you realize, like, no, that was actually my idea. That was my suggestion. That was my advice. Or she'll pretend like somebody else said it. So in this way, she discredits you. She makes you feel like, oh, my points are not valid enough that I even deserve credit or can be. And those things, we take them lightly, but they really matter emotionally. And they're really damaging in the long run if you really live with someone like that full time who never gives you credit or acknowledgement in these little things. And this is not to say we constantly need to be like complimenting each other or praising each other, but these things do really matter. They really, really matter. The small compliments, the small praises, the small acknowledgements that, hey, just because you gave me that idea, like even if it's just like someone telling you that, when you pour a cup of tea, you should just maybe tip the kettle this way and then it will stay hotter for longer. Even something as simple as that. Maybe one day coming back like, hey, you were right. Like I used that tip and it's working. You don't have to throw that person a parade or anything or a party for that, but simple acknowledgement, it doesn't take away anything from you. But my mother would make it seem like, no, I'm gonna be giving you too much credit if I act like you actually the one who gave me this advice, or you actually the one who pointed this out. So I'd rather pretend like I thought of it myself by paraphrasing what you said, or I would pretend like I heard it from somebody else. Again, this is just another way that she's actually competing with her own children, because she doesn't want to admit that her children can be so smart that they can give her advice or say something that she didn't think of. It doesn't make you dumb if someone younger than you, or someone that you didn't think could come up with that idea, gives you advice or a great suggestion or a great idea. It doesn't make you less dumb or less anything. It really doesn't take away anything for you to just acknowledge that, hey, maybe this person that I undermined or thought that they were young, they actually gave me solid advice, or they gave me a great idea. But pretending like that didn't even come from that person, that really just takes a hit on someone's confidence, and especially someone who's your child, because they really value what you think of them. And that really affected my sister. And I even see it now, how she doesn't even fully trust her own opinion, because my mother has done this to us time and time again, where she invalidates your opinion, where she invalidates your idea by acting like you couldn't have come up with something as great as that. So I'm just going to pretend like I don't. And she would even literally say this to my sister when my sister would confront her and say, but that's what I said. And then she would say, oh, I don't remember you saying that. How invalidating is that? How invalidating to say that you don't remember someone saying that, but all of a sudden somebody else said it. Somebody else now helped you, but then you don't remember this other person, your child, saying it. Yeah, crazy making, I tell you. Another way that this competition is like borrowing things from each other. Again, this just goes back to my mother. Like, I even stopped borrowing things from my mother, because there's almost this competition to say, like, oh, now I'm going to borrow your stuff. Like, I've said this in another episode that sometimes I feel like my mother thinks we are siblings, and we're not. I expect that kind of tension or that kind of behavior from a sibling. And then, like, when I would borrow something, maybe her earrings, and then next time she will feel like she has a right to, like, borrow something. Not even borrow, what's the word? I don't know. How do I put this? She will feel like then she has a right to some of my things because she borrowed me something. So again, this is just tit for tat. Like, whenever somebody in this house does something for you, they expect something in return. So it's like keeping count. Because I borrowed you this, you should borrow me this. So it doesn't matter if for example, sometimes you just have like precious things where you're like, oh, these earrings, I love them so much, I would never borrow anyone this. But my mother would be so childish as to such a point that, she would just want that one thing that you probably just cherish so much. And you're like, okay, now I feel forced. I feel forced to give it to you because you once borrowed me something. And this is not to say like I want to borrow people. I want to borrow things from people and then people not borrow from me. I'm fine with people borrowing things from me. It's just the way that you would go about it. Like even going as far as mentioning that she actually borrowed me. Like when you come to somebody and borrow something and you say, can you borrow me this because I borrowed you that? Like, why say that? Why not just borrow something? But somehow she has to make reference of the fact that I borrowed something from her, or she gave me something, as if we are both 16 year olds, but we are not. Like you are older and you should just be more mature in this situation and not act like you are my friend or a sibling. Another way that this competition is that what suits somebody else better. How do I put this? Like all of this is really just deeply rooted and planted by my mother. So sometimes she will just compliment my sister on something maybe that suits her. Let's say maybe a hairstyle or an outfit. And in a way, it is almost to undermine me. And she does the same thing with me. Sometimes she will compliment me or praise me on something, but it's not even really a genuine compliment because somehow the undertone in that is to make the other person, my sister, feel some type of way. So even if it's like complimenting someone with what they've done or a gift, there's an undertone, like an unspoken tone, a tone so subtle that you wouldn't detect it the first time it happened, or maybe even a couple of times it happened, because it took me years, over 20 years, to realize that this has been happening. There's this tone, this emotional manipulation, this mind games that she plays, whereby when she actually compliments someone else, she's actually just making the other person feel like, okay, you're not good enough. And she actually creates a competition and has created a competition between my sister and I. And I see that my sister and I, we also have this unspoken competition between us, because it was always a matter of impressing mom, because when she complimented one person, she made the other person feel bad. And it's not like she would say to one of us, oh, you beautiful and you are ugly. No, it wasn't that blatant. And that is the messed up part. That is it this type of emotional and psychological abuse, it is not as direct as you would think it is. So it's not a matter of her just saying to one child, oh, you are beautiful, and then to the other, oh, you are ugly. No, it's very subtle. It's in the tone, it's in the atmosphere. I can't even put words to it. But I know that the product of that is that my sister and I are now having this underground, unspoken competition between us, because that is what my mother planted within us, to always make the other one feel good about themselves at the expense of the other one feeling bad about themselves, feeling like they're not good enough, they didn't do it right, or they're not talented enough, or they don't look pretty enough. That is my mother for you. Another thing is that my mother is just overly eager to prove that she's right, especially when you are wrong. Oh, God forbid you are wrong about something, because wow, she will make it a point that she was right. For her, everything is just a case of either losing or winning. Again, back to that wound that is within her. There's no in between with my mom. Like, there's no in between, like, okay, like, yeah, I have made a point and maybe this person was wrong, but somehow it feels like she's gonna rub it in your face that you were actually wrong and she was right. It's almost like a moment of her just being on stage and saying, look at me, I'm smart because I was right. And when she's wrong, you can kind of see the shame, a shame that is very unnecessary. Because I've seen my mother at times when maybe she was wrong about something, and I see the shame in her and I see the internal turmoil, and I feel for her. And I don't even rub it in her face when she was wrong about something, but that is something she does to herself. This is why she is so ecstatic, to a point where she crushes your soul when she is right, because for her it's a matter of losing and winning. So when she's wrong, she feels like she's losing, and that's not true. Like when you are with your loved ones, it's not a matter of losing and winning. This is not a competition. This is not a sport match group. I don't know anything about sports, but this is not a team of rugby players where we feel like we didn't score, or this is not a game. We are a family and we're supposed to love each other and be there for each other, and not see arguments or behavior as like a win or a lose situation. And so I often see the shame within her when she is wrong. And we don't even make her feel like, yeah, see, you are wrong. I don't make her feel like that. I don't boast about me being right. I've never been that type of person. But somehow you can see the shame because she is already judging herself internally. She's already so desperate to be right about everything and be seen how smart she is, how wise she is, how right she is, that when she is wrong, she actually crucifies herself.